Martial Peak, Chapter 6010, Children. Yangji. Yangsu, get back here. A man scolded as a pair of dragon and phoenix teleported away. The two children, looking to be around 12, giggled as they disappeared. Meanwhile, the man slumped his shoulders in exhaustion. A beautiful woman with luscious lips and phoenix-like eyes appeared from behind him as she sighed. Xianxia, why didn't you just trap them within your domain? She was none other than Yang Shui, Yang Kai's sister. You think I didn't want to do that? How in the world did these two monsters get born? They sensed it before I could even use time principles and escaped. These twins are such a headache. Even adoptive father has a hard time dealing with them. Yang Xiao lamented, tasked with taking care of them while his adoptive father was having another one of his honeymoons. As their uncle, you should already know how capable they are. Their dragon and phoenix bloodlines are much purer than others. If they could manage to use it to suppress you, that would be a good laugh. Yang Shui teased as she patted him on his head. Yang Xiao felt as though a headache was rushing in. In fact, he could have done something about those two if he used a lot more of his strength. It was just, these children were too sly. To be more accurate, Yang Su was the cunning one and Yang Ji was the mischievous mastermind. Yang Su would always follow her brother's wishes, and if that meant pranks, that would be. He could not use his full strength because within the compound they were in, there were other children as well. These twins half-siblings, a large number of which were still young and still sleeping. Even when he scolded the two, he had to keep his voice down. If they all woke up and started crying, all hell would truly break loose. Since both the twins and him could not make a scene, what else could he realistically do? Yang Xiao signed once again and complained. Very funny. Well, not like the world can cause them any issues if they go out and run around. Those two schemers just so happen to choose the best time to run away when their grandparents are gone. Yang Shui chuckled. They do resemble you when you were young. Guess that's what it means to be a young dragon. Well, I guess it's best if we tell the others about their escape. What do you mean resemble me when I was young? I was never that naughty. Yang Xiao quipped, snorting at the idea. But aren't you going to go after them? If I go, who is going to deal with the aftermath of when all the children wake up? Yang Shui rolls her eyes at the obvious problem they faced. The two sighed as they stared out to the sky where those twins ran off to. Yay, we finally got out. Yang Ji, in the form of a small golden phoenix, cheered. He looked to his sister to see her checking on the item they took from their uncle. Yang Su, what did you get? Yang Ji asked, curious as to what that orb was. It was completely black, as though light did not reflect from it. Rather, it seemed as though light itself got absorbed by it to never return. Big brother, I don't really know, but I think we can ask Uncle Little 11 about it. Out of everyone, he is the only one we can trust. The rest of them will turn us in and force us back home. Yang Su thought for a while before replying. She had already turned to head towards where Little 11 was. Yang Su nodded, and they soon, together, manipulated space principles to instantly close the distance to their destination. Little 11, Fong Tianci, and Thunder Shadow were living quite a distance away from any major cities. In fact, the place they settled on within Void World had been labeled as a restricted zone. Although the whole Black Ink clan mess had been dealt with, there was too much bad blood that could not be washed away. Even if Yang Kai had pardoned Little 11 for his actions, that was not the case for the rest of the world. Even so, the wish of Moon needed to be honored, and Little 11 had to have a chance at normalcy. The best they could do was to keep him out of harm from others who might try to take revenge by setting up this restricted zone. It was not so much that Little 11 could not go out. Rather, it was a restricted zone where he would be safe if inside. Nevertheless, to atone for his mistake as M.O., he rather stayed inside. Fong Tianci and Thunder Shadow, who were tasked to watch over Little 11, naturally stayed by his side. Though they were his observers, after growing up together, they had become more or less friends. The occasional fist or claw exchange still happens, but overall they were close. Over the years, Yang Kai had visited them in their homes. Sometimes, he would even bring his children here to shave off some of the trio's boredom. It was on these trips that Yang Su and Yang Ji got to know of their uncles. It was also from these trips that they memorized the location and route. When kilometers outside of the restricted zone, Xianxia raised his arm to stop his sister. He looked around and checked his surroundings, scrutinizing every detail. Phew, looks like no one has caught up to us yet. Xianxia smiled and said, Big brother, I don't think anyone would look for us out here. If they wanted to catch us, they would have waited for us inside. Xianxia said, giving him a side eye. No. We have to play it safe. Look, before we even get close, we need to avoid Uncle Fong Tianci and Uncle Thundershadow's divine sense, right? If they catch on to us, then we'll immediately be sent back. Xianxia said, convinced that would happen. Then what should we do? I'm pretty sure that their divine sense encompasses the whole restricted zone. I doubt we would be able to sneak past them. Xianxia asked, not understanding her brother's thoughts. Before I answer that, let me ask you, do you think both of us are faster than them? Xianxia asked, already knowing the answer. If we work together, maybe. We've never really seen them use their full powers before, so I doubt we can beat them in terms of speed. Uncle Fong Tianci is also proficient in the Tao of space. If we were to compare who had better control, him or us, I doubt we would win. Xianxia said while looking at her small white fist clenching and opening. You're right. Actually, no matter how I see it, I don't think we'll be able to beat either of them. Even Uncle Thundershadow is ridiculously fast. So, what we need to do is to lure them away. The stratagem known as luring the tiger away from the mountain. Xianxia said as he puffed up his chest and beat it. The little boy seemed to have thought that he seemed impressive, but his sister had already thought of this. That's far easier said than done. How are we supposed to lure them away? If one leaves, the other will remain. Xianxia shook her head, believing this to be unfeasible. Xianxia placed his index finger on her lips and smirked. There's where you are wrong, my dear sister. You are forgetting that I have a storage ring with me. Xianxia said, as though every little detail had already been thought up. Xianxia stood silent and just decided to go with the flow. Marshall Peak, Chapter 6011, Trapped. Within the restricted zone, a man, a black panther, and a little boy sat around a circular table. It was their usual gathering time, where they would enjoy the simplicities in life. Treats and banters were always abound during these gatherings, gathered at the center for whoever wants to take them. Hey, the communication artifact had lit up. What did it say? The little boy asked in wonder. It was obvious that something must have happened for the usual stoic man to suddenly sigh. Fong Tianci sighed again. It's Big Brother's children. 2 of them seem to have escaped from home while their parents are on a honeymoon. Thunder Shadow tilted his head. Wait, they are going on a honeymoon again? Fong Tianci scratched his face. With so many wives, Big Brother does have it rough. Besides, they're most likely not just playing around. They're most likely looking around for materials to build the artifact Big Brother wants. The one he's going to use for that long voyage? Little 11 asked while in deep thought. Yeah, the trip definitely won't be easy. But not like there's much we can do about it. Judging from the description of those people he had to deal with, and the taboo realm, it's best to prepare. Fong Tianci added. He considered joining his big brother, but his priority was to remain by little 11's side. At the same time, all 3 of them would feel uneasy if they all left the 3,000 worlds. Thus, at one of their gatherings, they had already discussed and decided Fong Tianci and Thundershadow would be staying to guard the 3,000 worlds just in case. Naturally, little 11 was also present at the scene during these discussions. He had made the active decision to remain here, as this was Mu's final resting place. It was also the least he could do for terrorizing the 3,000 worlds for so long. At this time, all 3 sensed 2 familiar auras. They all immediately looked at each other, and 2 pairs of eyes fell on Fong Tianci. All right, I'll go. Fong Tianci stood up and leaped, disappearing in an instant. Little 11 and Thunder Shadow both shrugged. They both nodded, as though it was the expected outcome. After all, little 11 needed to stay within the restricted zone. As for Thunder Shadow, although he was fast, he by no means could hope to beat his second brother. It was naturally by no means that they just wanted to watch the show. Certainly not. Yang Ji and Yang Su could both sense a disturbance in space. They immediately threw out one of the artifacts that Yang Ji had brought with him. It was an array plate. The array plate landed on the space that started to ripple, and it immediately activated. The area it captured was so large that it encompassed at least 10 kilometers. Naturally, that meant whoever was going to appear and the two children would get caught up in this trap at the same time. Yang Ji immediately grabbed hold of Yang Su's hand, and they flew. He took out a token, and they immediately escaped from the array. The array plate was made specially to contain whatever was inside. However, it was far from simple. It was made by Grandmaster Ma Fan and Yang Kai. This was a gift to the twins, whereby they would be able to train in. It would create an independent space, whereby the twins would be able to go through different illusionary environments. There were places with sweltering lava pools. There were canyons with astral winds. There were caves of freezing ice. Regardless, even till now, the two had not cleared all regions. Still, this array plate functioned as both a training ground and a means of protection. They could trap their enemies inside and leave them there while they escaped. As for the two, they naturally had a token to escape the array plate. When Yang Ji and Yang Su got out, they looked at each other. They both knew that with Feng Tianxi's abilities, escaping this array was only a matter of time. Still, they could not help but smile since they've trapped him. They both gave each other a high five, and Yang Ji said, "Okay, that's one down. I don't think Uncle Thunder Shadow will come out anytime soon, though. So, we need to just continue onwards. Let's do this as planned. We need to get past the restriction array first." Okay. Yang Su nodded and took out another token. This time, it was a token for the restriction array. In general, this was a special identification token. It could be for the various arrays around Void World. Naturally, this restriction array was no exception, since most of the Yang family would come here from time to time. The two children took out their identification token and placed it against the restriction array. The typically transparent dome suddenly had some blue hue to it. A small hole soon appeared, and it quickly enlarged till the side of 3 men. The two children went in with little regard for the array plate they left behind. The path to the center was straightforward. In fact, a small path within this dense forest would light up in front of them to guide them. This path was not real. It was an illusion created with some board modification made by Little 11. The path was created such that glowing rectangles were painted on the ground. Little 11 even took the effort to make them always perfectly contour the ground, to make it seem as though the ground had been painted over. Any shrubs protruding would be circled, as though they should be watched out for. Yang Ji and Yang Su did not understand how such a thing was made, but that was just what made Uncle 11 more impressive in their hearts. The two continued forward as guided by the path. To say the scenery here was picturesque would be an understatement. With how much time they had, Feng Tianxi, Thunder Shadow, and Little 11 would decorate their surroundings. It was not an exaggeration to say that everything here had been made, since regardless if a blade of grass or dirt had been here, they would have been moved or replaced by any of the three at some point in time. In fact, a common topic of their discussions, if not about cultivation and news, was about their place. Looking at such sites again, with certain mountains having changed location and certain trees being replaced by another breed, Yang Ji and Yang Su had their gazes taken. However, as they moved closer to the center, they remembered what they needed to do, and they ceased getting distracted. There they saw a black panther and a little boy who looked to be around their age, who they call Uncle. Marshall Peak, Chapter 6012, leaving the restricted zone. When the twins could be spotted, the two on the table just minded their own business. They had already sensed them before they entered. Naturally, their presence came as no surprise. Thunder Shadow even lazily opened one of his eyes to peek, almost intent on not doing anything. As for Little 11, he waved at the twins to welcome them over. For him, who had always been close to the two, this was a great time to catch up. Yang Ji could not help but look at Yang Su before turning his head back at the two by the table. He was a little taken aback by Thunder Shadow's nonchalance. He had imagined they needed to do something to stop their capture. However, it turned out that nothing really needed to be done. As for Xianxia, she half predicted this outcome. She never believed that Xianxia had any true intention of catching up. In fact, she wanted to question her brother, why he had to go this far. Was it not more entertaining to just play along? Seeing that Xianxia was not planning to move, Xianxia took the initiative to take his hand and bring him forward. The two slowly walked up to the table, where Little 11 asked, "Hey, what are you two doing here?" Thunder Shadow seemed to completely ignore these two. Instead, his attention was fully focused on the outside, as though he was waiting for Xianxia to get out of his predicament. Xianxia was the one who answered. "We got this from back home. We were wondering what this is." Xianxia immediately took the initiative to take out the black orb. His hands were still a little shaky due to nervousness. The moment Little 11 saw the orb, his eyes lit up. He immediately took it into his small hands and smirked. He asked, "Do you have any guess as to what this is?" The twins looked at each other and then back at him to only shake their heads. "If we knew, why would we need to come and look for you?" Little 11's smile widened, as though he had won. He moved his arms around the two and whispered, "This is a really fun toy that you've brought. I can't believe that you've managed to get a hold of this." The twins' eyes brightened with expectation. They could not wait for him to tell them already. However, before they could push Little 11 for an answer, he pushed the topic aside to further agitate them. "Okay, how about we deal with this later? For now, let's get those two killjoys out of the picture first." Once he said that, the space around him seemed to darken. Even Thunder Shadow was alarmed by this development. Before Thunder Shadow could act, his body was engulfed in darkness. Sticky darkness that he felt his limbs could not maneuver through. He raged, annoyed that this prankster got the best of him. "When did you? Damn it." A playful voice could be heard from above. "You don't have to get so mad. You've done worse to me, and we are all still such best of friends, no? I'll take care of the kids for a while. Not to worry. I'll bring them back." "Friends? You call us friends?" Thunder Shadow roared, but his voice seemed to have gone unheard. Seeming as though Little 11 had disappeared, he scoffed. "Out of all the techniques you could have used, you had to use Abyssal Dome. Do you plan to keep me locked up here until you get back?" Abyssal Dome was a secret technique Little 11 had developed to keep Xianxia and Thunder Shadow confined in one space. It worked to a certain extent against Xianxia, but worked too well against Thunder Shadow. The last time Little 11 used it on Thunder Shadow, the latter could not come out until he started begging. Seeing the secret technique again just poured salt into his wounds. Thankfully, after a few minutes had passed, a crack started to form at the top of the dome. It slowly became like a spider web, spreading out. Not wasting a single second, Thunder Shadow rushed out, crashing his head against the weak spot, causing the whole thing to collapse. The sight before him came as no surprise. It was Xianxia, who was already waiting with folded arms. The two stared at each other in silence for a while. It was Thunder Shadow who took the initiative to speak. "Why did you not catch them when you were just loitering around?" Xianxia simply looked at the direction where the twins and Little 11 had run off to. He shook his head and sighed. Just let them be. The thing those two took is something that was meant for Little 11 in the first place. If you're so worried, we could just go and follow them in secret." Thunder Shadow scoffed and then asked, "But they might leave the restricted zone, you know? Aren't we supposed to keep an eye on Little 11 and ensure that he does not leave? After being with him for so long, we both know that he had no desire to cause harm to any of us. In the first place, this restricted zone is more of keeping the others out than keeping him in. It's fine. I'm actually more interested to see what they plan on doing with that orb. Besides, weren't you the one who tried to persuade him to go out to play?" Xianxia sighed as he mounted on top of Thunder Shadow, as if it were natural. Thunder Shadow knew about the artifact. However, he felt it to be strange. There was no need for Little 11 to leave the restricted zone to use it, much less bring the children along with him. He wanted to ask Xianxia about his guess as to why this was the case. However, Seeing Fong Tianci having no intent of explaining, Thunder Shadow just followed along and started moving. The moment he took his first step, space was split and a void crack appeared. The two, Panther and Human, soon entered. Little 11 was quick to bring Yang Ji and Yang Su out of the restricted zone. It was as if nothing hindered him anymore. Instead of bringing them in any other direction, he brought them to where the twins had supposedly trapped Fong Tianci. The array that had been established from the array plate had already been broken through. There was a huge hole at the top, which was slowly closing up. When Yang Ji saw the initial destruction, his heart had dropped. If his array plate got destroyed, who knew what kind of punishment awaited him? His spirit only got lifted after he realized that the array plate had a self-repairing function. Little 11 was quick to point at the array as he said, "Hurry up and keep your toy." Yang Ji and Yang Su looked at him in wonder. They had not seen him in such a hurry before. It was certainly a rare sight to see. They did as they were told. The array token was fished out, allowing for easy access into and through the array. These two quickly went back into the core of the array and shut it down. When the array disappeared with the two children exposed to the outside world, Little 11 immediately appeared beside them. He moved his arm to wrap them in his shoulders, and they soon disappeared. On the group, where they had stood, a small text was carved into the ground, heading to the World Tree. Marshall Peak, Chapter 6013, Glimpses. In front of Yang Ji and Yang Su's eyes, space seemed to warp. From what they knew, it was not so much the application of space principles, but something far more profound. It was not that they moved through the void. Rather, space itself seemed to have folded, and they arrived at a large open area. This large open area was not an unfamiliar place. They have been here before. Typically, if they wished to travel to distant worlds, their father would bring them here first. As per their memories, there was a gigantic tree at the center of the area. On its branches were what seemed to be fruits. With their current mastery over the Tao of space and the Tao of time, they could vaguely feel that these fruits were far from ordinary. They seemed to have an explicit connection to some kind of distant place. Little 11 walked up to the large tree and asked while displaying the black orb in his hand. "Old tree, long time no see." The old tree, which was withered, frail, and aged, had seemed to have its life completely turned around, since its vitality was linked to the universe worlds connected to it. Once Xianxia started repairing the damages caused by the Black Ink clan, the world tree had gotten a new lease in life. Not as lethargic as before, the old tree responded, a little wary, "I don't think that we've met for quite a long time. I believe the last time was establishing an alternative route to transport to me without using my clones. What is it this time?" Little 11, Fong Tianci, and Thunder Shadow had visited the World Tree before. While Fong Tianci and Thunder Shadow seeked it out to find an alternative to reach the Ninth Order, Little 11 was different. He wanted to find a way to transport others to the World Tree without needing Xianxia to ferry them around. This alternative method had some requirements. Namely, a third party without a World Tree clone would be able to use it. He also did not want the World Tree to be able to constantly spy on them through this connection. While Fong Tianci and Thunder Shadow found no luck in cracking through the Ninth Order barrier, Little 11 had made great strides. It was just that he needed some sacrifices from the World Tree. In short, he needed parts from the World Tree. The World Tree was initially unwilling to participate in this. After all, it had no real relationship with Little 11. In fact, they should have bad blood against each other. However, with Xianxia, Fong Tianci, and Thunder Shadow's encouragement, it eventually relented. It understood that Xianxia was going to leave eventually, and a method to move around through connected universe worlds would be invaluable for others, especially those close to him. Knowing that this would benefit its savior, and knowing that it still had the discretion of who to send and where, the World Tree eventually caved. Little did the World Tree know, Little 11 at that time was a complete beginner at artifact refining and arrays. Little 11 definitely had help, and he progressed very quickly thanks to that. However, The amount of parts the world tree had to sacrifice would make even a grown man weep. Seeing this boy again, who treated his own body as mere ingredients, the world tree could not help but be wary. It was just instinctual at this point. I know you don't really like me. I understand that we haven't gotten along on the best of terms. But I do need your help in this. I need to get to where that Heaven's Order girl is. I'm also bringing these 2 kids along with me. Little 11 said, and pushed the twins beside him to the front. The world tree looked at the twins and recognized them. He asked, curious, "These 2 are Yang Kai's children, are they not? Why are you bringing them all the way here? You're even going as far as to bring them so far out. Although they are divine spirits, they are not strong enough to go out there just yet." Little 11 took out the black orb and held it up high for the world tree. They were the ones who brought this to me. So, I believe that they have the right to see what lies beyond. Besides, these kids will most likely get agitated if I take what they have passed on to me and just disappear. The world tree initially could not tell what that orb was at first sight. It had to stare for at least a couple of seconds to understand what it was. This orb was like the antithesis of light. It would absorb all the light around it. It could feel a faint connection to this orb. It was similar to the artifact Little 11 wanted to refine, just that this was not an artifact for transportation. The world tree could sense that one of its clones was inside, but the connection was really faint. It was as though there was something profound blocking all connections into whatever was inside the orb. The world tree pondered over it for a moment, and its eyes widened with shock. It could not help but ask, "Are you certain you want to go through with this? There may be no return. What's more, you want to bring 2 innocent children along with you. What if something goes wrong?" Little 11 added, "That's why I'm bringing them to her, right? Anyways, I don't think they've visited her before. It'll be fine. Yang Kai had already given me his word." The world tree, not having heard about this from Yang Kai, doubted Little 11's words. It closed its eyes for a moment before opening them up again. "All right, I've just asked. Yang Kai has given me his word that everything will be fine. If so, then I'll allow you passage to the chaotic dead territory." The world tree said, and tried to sense nearby universe worlds. When it spotted one, it gave a perplexed look. "You're fortunate that the person you are seeking is in a universe world at the moment." The world tree added, thinking that it was strange for the chaotic dead territory to have a universe world inside of it. The other closest one would take a few days to reach the edge of the chaotic dead territory. "Fortunate, huh?" Little 11 muttered as he looked at those 2 children in front of him. It was obvious that they were lost as to what was going on. However, explaining it all now would ruin the surprise. The world tree sighed and waved a branch. A portal soon opened behind the trio. However, before they turned, the world tree tossed out 3 seedlings, 1 to each person. It added, "None of us can afford it if something were to go wrong. Take these just in case." Little 11 bowed. He noticed that the twins were quite proactive in this regard, and they also followed him to bow. They took the seedlings with both hands and walked away. As they drifted a distance, and the portal started to close, another opened up behind theirs. Chapter 6014, Chaotic Dead Territory. For Yangji and Yangsu, the whole thing had been a blur. One moment, they were in the restricted zone. The next, they were meeting with the world tree. And finally, a place where the skies were devoid of anything. If anything, the twins found the place called Chaotic Dead Territory to be frightening. They had never heard of a place where there were no celestial bodies, except for the thing under their feet. This place felt no different to an abandoned land. Worst, there were powerful and bright yellow and blue flashes in the sky. It was only thanks to Little 11's presence that they could remain calm. It was also fortunate for them that within 5 minutes of travel, they already spotted a small hut. Its exterior was completely plain, as though the owner had no conscious thoughts about luxury and only enjoyed the simplicities of life. Except for a simple garden and a table and a few chairs set up outside, there was nothing else. A woman could be seen tending to her garden, seeming to be unconcerned about the flashes in the sky. She looked young and had a graceful appearance. She was a beauty, certainly, but in the eyes of Yangji and Yangsu, who had so many world-destroying beauties as mothers, she would not be considered to be anything that special. Other than her appearance, the twins could sense that her cultivation was unfathomable. They could not tell her cultivation realm, but they knew that this one woman was stronger than any of their mothers. They immediately knew this woman must be the Heaven's Order girl Little 11 was referring to. She was such a powerful woman, yet the moment they approached, they could clearly see her stop whatever she was doing to go up to them and bowed. The twins' immediate reaction was to look at Little 11. After all, they had never met this woman before and would not deserve such honors. However, when they saw Little 11's fierce reaction of shaking his head, they got even more confused. That was until Xianxia she greeted, "Young master, young mistress, I welcome you too to my humble abode. I believe this is the first time we are meeting. I'm Xianxia she, your father's maid. To what do I owe the pleasure of your visit?" The twins looked at each other and glared at Little 11, as though questioning, "Like I know." Little 11 gave a light cough and quickly took out the orb. He showed it to Xianxia she and stated, "We are here for this." Xianxia she's eyes seemed to shine with a perturbed glimmer as she looked at the two young children in front of her. She checked their cultivation and was astonished. In them hide a ton of secrets that were more than meets the eye. These two were divine spirits, but were already equivalent to Tao Source Realm Masters. If they were monster beasts, they would be regarded as 11th Order monster beasts. Furthermore, these two both had divine spirit sources and not just ordinary divine spirit sources. They both had sources that seemed to be greater than the ancestral level, which should have been impossible. It had to be noted that Yang Kai's ancestral dragon source was from a dragon that had reached the pinnacle of known cultivation before the world creation realm was achieved by him. For these two to have sources that were greater than that meant only one thing. Their existence was on par with her Heaven's Order bloodline. In other words, when she was still at her peak, her Heaven's Order bloodline would have no suppressive effects on them at all. It was frightening to know that these two were merely around 12. Still, it might be reasonable as these two were the result of a union between a 9th Order Phoenix and a World Creation Realm Dragon, a never-seen-before combination. Although Xianxia she could roughly gauge how strong they were, she could not really say that these kids fell into any of the normal categories in terms of cultivation realms. The strangest thing about these two was that their cultivation did not over-rely on their natural-born divine spirit source. It was some other technique that was too complex for her to grasp. The one thing she knew was that there was a harmonious link between the twins, whereby both basically have the same aura. Still, for what Little 11 wants to do, Xianxia she still felt that bringing along two children only around the Tao Source realm would be too dangerous. She wanted to warn him, but before she could do so, the flashes in the sky ceased and two figures rushed towards them. Naturally, these two figures were Sun's burning light and Moon's serene glimmer. They had come down after their round had ended. Moon's serene glimmer had a beam on her face while Sun's burning light was downcast, obviously highlighting who had won. These two had naturally sensed the visitors when they had arrived, especially the one which they had tested. Still, seeing that there were two kids here, they held back their ire, especially since the two kids had even taken a few steps back once they had arrived. To be fair, Yang Ji and Yang Su did not take a step back because the two had imposing appearances. It was more to do with their unconstrained aura that seemed to be constantly lashing out in the air. If it was not for that, they would be more than willing to befriend these other two kids. You two are scaring them. Try restraining your aura some more. If not, best to just merge with me so that you can remain here. Xianxia she said as she sighed. Although they had been working hard on controlling their powers, Sun's burning light and Moon's serene glimmer still could not fully do so on their own at all times. Sun's burning light and Moon's serene glimmer exclaimed as though this thought had finally hit them. To be fair, they hardly had guests, and of the few, most would bear with it. If they were fearful, they would try their best to hide it. The duo tried their best to contain as much of their power inside of them. Although it was difficult, after so many years of practice, and with Xianxia she's help, they could at least manage to maintain this state for an hour. Once they did so, the two quickly approached the twins. Sun's burning light immediately went to Xianxia and Moon's serene glimmer to Xianxia. The two of them inspected the one in front of them like they were looking at a rare animal. Naturally, this drew the ire of the twins, and they snapped back. Are you done looking? Has no one told you? You ought to respect your seniors? Chapter 60:15, Sun and Moon Marks. Seniors. Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light looked at each other with wide eyes. Their gaze naturally fell on little 11, who had both his hands against his mouth, hiding his smirk. They respectively pulled Xianxia and Xianxia's ear as they roared. You're the juniors. The aura those two exuded was one in which no question could be asked. They completely dominated the conversation as they stared daggers at little 11. Initially, the twins tried to struggle, but it was fruitless. The strength difference was just that vast. Worse, their ears really started to hurt. Xianxia, she could not bear this sight anymore and interjected. Enough. Let those two go. They might have been rude, but you two haven't properly presented yourselves as seniors. Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light pouted, and they both argued, but no buts. If you want to be treated as seniors, you must act like seniors. Xianxia, she added, as she pulled on both their ears. Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light both let go. They put up a struggle as well, but their struggle seemed weak, as though they were just putting on a show of reluctance rather than actually struggling. Xianxia and Xianxia both rubbed their ears and glared at Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light. Meanwhile, little 11 was just enjoying the show. Truth be told, little 11 did not hate the two. It was just a natural instinct to dislike them, just like how they disliked him. It had nothing to do with their personality. In fact, if they had to spend 1,000,000 years together, he was certain he would still dislike them. Both Xianxia, she, and little 11 were aware of this. The only ones who most likely had not noticed were Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light themselves. It was like how their actions toward Xianxia, she were instinctually so amicable. Xianxia, she would like to lecture the two, but she did not wish to waste any more time. It was best for little 11 and these two to be separated as soon as possible. Keeping them in the same space was just asking for trouble. They'll be gone soon enough, so don't cause any more trouble. They are here for the profound source gate. Xianxia, she placated. The profound source gate. Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light both questioned as they turned to little 11, who was holding the orb in hand. They both showed looks of disgust at the idea. As for Xianxia and Xianxia, they both tilted their heads. This was the first time they were hearing about this. Xianxia looked at her brother, but he could only shrug his shoulders and point to little 11. Little 11 walked forward and explained to the two. Let me explain. Your father had helped me seal my home inside of this orb. I describe it as home, since that's where I'm from. But things are not that simple. Before I met your father, I was a monster who could not control my powers. I was consumed by it. Right now, most of my powers are basically being sealed inside of my home. I wish to regain some of my powers, and for that, I would need your help. Little 11 explained in the most concise way he could think of. The twins looked at each other, confused. After all, why would he need them out of everyone? Surely, their father would be able to help. As if he had seen through their thoughts, little 11 continued. We've tried already. Your father and I have entered before. But it did not work. My powers were not there. It was scared away by your father. We've tried it a few times before with different people. I've even tried going back with those too. Little 11 pointed to the two other children who still had their ears gripped. Overall, we have tried those that are powerful enough to not get corrupted by my powers. It is too risky to take anyone else. But you two have a special constitution that would prevent you from getting corrupted by my powers. Your power can run away. Xianxia and Xianxia had never heard of such an absurd thing before. Nevertheless, since it was their Uncle 11 saying it, it must be true. Still, it was hard to believe. The twins soon heard a woman interject. It's not confirmed that you two will not get corrupted. It's only a guess. Xianxia, she added. She was opposed to this plan. She believed it was too risky. Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light finally had their ears released as they added, "Exactly. There is no telling what might happen if you two go in. You shouldn't bring them in." Little 11 shook his head. "I know this is risky, but I cannot go in by myself. I have a high chance of being corrupted. Without these two, I can't think of any other candidate that can join me. Right now, they would not be deemed as a threat. If we wait any longer, when they reach the open heaven realm, it might be too late. So this is the only time. Besides, this is the only time where their mothers are away." Little 11 wanted to add that in, but refrained from doing so, saying that would only serve to have Xianxia, she more adamant on refusing to cooperate. "Xianxia," she proposed, "there's no need to do it now. We can wait till they are older. Their cultivation has not even reached the Emperor realm. We can wait till then." Little 11 remained adamant. There would be no difference between now and later. They cannot be corrupted by black ink strength. This is a fact. If you don't believe me, let those two test them. Xianxia, she hesitated for a moment, but as though curiosity got the better of Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light, they just went up to the twins. They both forcibly grabbed the other's hand and laid down their sun mark and moon mark. Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light felt strange. This was the first time that they felt their marks only needed to be placed on different individuals. Typically, a person would require a pair of marks to fully utilize its powers. However, Xianxia and Xianxia only needed one mark each. Xianxia had the sun mark while Xianxia had the moon mark. With one mark on each child, they already seemed complete. Chapter 60:16, Preparations complete. Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light looked at each other, confused. This has certainly never happened before. With the marks on them, Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light realized the intricacies of their powers. Though all of their heritage could be said to have originated from the primordial light, these two were slightly different. They definitely had the identity of being divine spirits, and their connection to the primordial light, along with connection to Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light, were unquestionable. However, their existence was at the same time out of the sphere of influence of the primordial light. In other words, the twins could obtain the sun and moon marks due to their connection. However, sun and moon marks would have no real influence on them. Their existence has in essence exceeded the marks, and their cultivation would not grow or improve from the marks. There was no bloodline to purity, nor divine spirit source to strengthen. In fact, the sun and moon marks were to the twins no different from just tools. It might really be the case where the black ink strength could not affect them, since even power close to the primordial light did not affect them. Naturally, for Moon's serene glimmer and the sun's burning light, their minds had never developed to go so deep. It was just like Little 11 had said, they tested the twins, and they had instinctively felt the two to be incorruptible. After all, they could not influence these two. How could black ink strength possibly do so? They refused to accept it. Moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light looked at each other and gave a nod. They acted like the great seniors they were. Yes, very powerful. About to reach our level. Yes, about to reach our level. Little 11 had to open his lips to help Xianxia, she confirmed. After all, if these two started acting, it would take an eternity to get things done. So, they won't be influenced by black ink strength, right? Yeah, won't. The two answered simultaneously. Little 11 turned to Xianxia, and added, "There you have it. All three of us have basically reached the same conclusion. I understand that you are worried for them, but I can assure you that they will be absolutely safe. I can even swear to heaven." Xianxia, she sighed and relented. She believed that if there was really something to worry about, Yang Kai would have done something beforehand. These were his two children. After all, he must have a certain level of confidence in this plan to allow the situation to evolve to this. All right, I understand. So, we just have to prepare as usual, right? Xianxia, she said as she used her hand to signal to Moon's serene glimmer and the sun's burning light to get ready. The two split away and appeared behind Xianxia, before they left. Since this was not the first time they've tried to do this, they were pretty familiar with the procedure. Previously, besides Yang Kai, others like Fong Tianci and Thunder Shadow had tried to go in with Little 11. Naturally, they had a world tree clone inside of their small universe to protect themselves before they attempted this. Zhang Ruo, she had led the way, and Little 11 had led the twins to follow along. While walking, Little 11 explained to them, later, inside the profound source gate, you will need to stick close to me. Never one or too far away. It'll be pitch black inside, and the other me might attack us. Other you? Yang Ji asked. Yes, you can think of him as my evil twin brother. You can sort of say that all the bad things I did was because of him, but I would still like to claim responsibility for my failure to stop him. Little 11 said with a heavy heart. If Mu was here, she would definitely say that it was not his fault. However, it was a fact that his own inability to control his powers had led to so many years of tragedy. Uncle, then what would you like to do with your twin brother? This time, it was Xianxia that asked. Well, we were originally one. I wish to be able to get back to that state. Little 11 replied. So, you're getting remarried to your brother? Xianxia asked with a twinkle in her eye. Cough. Little 11 scratched his head and tried his best to come up with an easy-to-understand response. No. Merging would be the more accurate term. In the past, I could not control my powers, and it ran amok. It has essentially become another person. So, I'm just trying to take back control over my powers. When inside, you will see me trying to absorb it. It will resist, maybe attack, maybe try to flood into me to erase my consciousness. I would need you to protect me. Can you do that for me? The twins responded in unison. Little 11 further elaborated on what they needed to do while inside, and the twins listened so attentively that their tutors would be envious. The lecture took quite a while until they reached an open area with clear arrays on the ground. In the middle was a dent with markings around it, and spreading out from it. Mountains, rivers, trees, stones, structures all seemed to be in harmony as a complex network of nested arrays were abound. Although it was not something viewable from the ground, the whole universe world had in fact been made into an array. The purpose was twofold: to prevent this universe world from breaking apart while moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light played, and to prevent any hazards from escaping if something were to go wrong. In fact, the reason why this whole venture had been done in the chaotic dead territory was to limit the risk of another outbreak of black ink strength. After all, moon's serene glimmer and sun's burning light were here. Even if they could not ultimately stop black ink strength from spreading, they would be able to buy enough time for Yang Kai to come and secure the area. Chapter 60:17, Descend into the Orb. Little 11 looked around in remembrance, while the twins stared at the patterns on the ground and structures. If they were to describe their feelings towards this array, it would be overbearing. Even their own home and the restricted zone did not have such dense array patterns. The weight of everything seemed to really hit them at this moment, as they felt the invisible pressure of the expectation from what they were about to do. After all, words to describe were incomparable from first-hand experience in going up on stage. The amount of effort it took to build this stage was incalculable. 4 arrays, every detail had to be taken note of, and these were nested arrays. Though the twins did not know the whole universe world had been made into an array, just from seeing the distant mountains and rivers having such intricate patterns, they now knew how critical this was. Unconsciously, their hands slowly moved to hold each other. Little 11 took out the orb as though displaying it. He pointed to the dent in the middle and started to explain. Before I place it there, do note that your safety is of utmost importance. If something awful happens, past the point of what you feel is safe, retreat. It was at this time Zhang Ruo, she moved towards them with 2 space rings. As though continuing from where Little 11 left off, these are 2 space rings that are vital. Do put them on and make sure you do not lose them under any circumstances. Inside are yin and yang crystals. Blue crystals for yin and yellow crystals for yang. There is also a token in each ring. Break it to immediately leave the place. Yang Ji and Yang Su accepted the ring with both hands. They used their divine sense to check through the contents and were astonished to find mountains upon mountains of blue and yellow crystals. There were other items like pills and artifacts as well, but the second most eye-catching thing inside the ring was definitely the token with a return written on it. Compared to the rest, this token had an overt aura of someone familiar. Someone who the twins often joked as Grandmaster Trouble, Ma Fan. The twins looked at each other, and without a word, they swapped rings. They each compared what they got and nodded before putting the ring on. Once they wore it, the band of the rings seemed to tighten as to perfectly fit their fingers. Xianxia looked at Little 11 and asked, "Uncle 11, why don't you also get a space ring?" Little 11 chuckled and explained how he had gone on this trip so many times that he had already prepared what he needed, that they should not worry about him. Xianxia, she just shook her head and proceeded to instruct. "Before you go in, let me brief you on another artifact you need to take note of." Xianxia, she took out something that seemed to look like a lantern. However, the artifact was not fueled with charcoal. Rather, it required the use of blue and yellow crystals. From what the twins could see, the area it lit up was considerable enough, around a 100-meter radius. The rate of consumption was also not too fast, with them needing to replace the crystals inside every 4 hours or so. Xianxia, she continued to explain about each artifact in detail within the ring, about the other use of the crystals, as though this was the only way she could soothe her worries. Nevertheless, the time had come and nothing else needed to be said. "That's about everything. You understand everything, right?" Xianxia, she asked, to which the twins replied with a firm nod. Naturally, Xianxia, she knew that with their cultivation, everything that was said were all remembered. She just could not help herself from asking. Little 11 stepped in and signaled for the twins to come closer. He was already standing on the circular platform with a dent in it. "Okay, I think we've already gone through everything. Xianxia, Xianxia, come here and stand within this circle." Knowing there was nothing else she could do, Xianxia, she sighed and took a few steps back. Meanwhile, the twins followed their uncle's instructions and stepped into the same circular platform as him. Once they were within it, Little 11 asked in confirmation, "Ready? In." The twins held each other's hand as they gave a firm nod. Little 11 soon placed the orb in the dent, and the whole universe world seemed to tremble. The patterns all around them started glowing, and the structure beneath their feet began to drop down. The whole circular area had begun to sink into the ground. When Xianxia and Xianxia looked at their surroundings in astonishment, they saw the whole mountains and rivers start to glow with countless mysterious patterns being lit up. Finally, their eyes laid on the three not in the circle, who waved their hands for a farewell. They could see Xianxia, she being reluctant. As for Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light, who had been playful this whole time, they wore solemn expressions. That was the last scene they saw of the outside world as the circular platform beneath their feet quickened in its descent. Over the course of the next few seconds, the hole above their heads, leading to the sky, got as small as an apple. Eventually, even the sky could not be seen anymore as the exit got covered, with the only light source being the glowing patterns of the array of the walls and floor. They could even hear the sounds of what seemed to be multiple gates above them being closed, with this sound being continuously played and getting closer. At some point, Little 11 spoke up, maybe due to his own emotions, or maybe due to seeing how the kids were so tense that they did not speak. "I have to thank you too for this. Honestly, I doubt any other person could accompany me on this journey. For the two of you, you need not worry too much. I'll handle everything." Even though Little 11 said such words, the twins were not fools. If he could truly handle everything, then what were they here for? They obviously had a special role in the grand scheme of things. They were just worried they would mess up. Xianxia, the more tactful one, was the first one to answer with a nod. Xianxia also gave a nod as a follow-up. Not too long, the walls and everything seemed to start to get brighter, and in a flash, the whole space they were in had changed. "Sullivan, I feel like I've dragged the prep work for too long. I can't help but feel like they need this much prep work done, though." Well, in the next chapter, we'll be inside the profound source gate. Chapter 6018, Try Touching. The next moment, Xianxia and Xianxia opened their eyes. They were already in an empty space with a gate in front of them. The empty space was completely white. It was not painted white, but rather glowing white. Even without explanation, Xianxia and Xianxia could feel the warm and mighty energy emitted from their feet. Meanwhile, the white sky was merely a reflection of the ground. In fact, they believed the reason why the orb looked so dark from the outside was because all kinds of energy could not escape from the orb and was trapped inside by this reflective sky. As for the gate, it was larger than any other gate they had seen before and tightly sealed. It was carved with intricate patterns, and every one of them seemed to be the essence of numerous grand Taos. Although Xianxia and Xianxia did not know much about the Tao of artifact refining, they could nevertheless tell that this gate was not something humans created. It perfectly resonated with heaven and earth, as though it had been birthed along with the universe. Little 11 proceeded to approach the gate, and the twins followed. Before anything else, Little 11 instructed them to touch the gate first. When they did, memories of the past flooded their minds, terrible memories. For Xianxia, he remembered the time when he got scolded by his mother for catching him not studying seriously. The spanking that followed was not one he wished to remember. He could already feel his butt turn red. For Xianxia, she remembered the time when she caught her brother saying he wanted to be like their father and have his own harem. She beat him up afterwards, and their relationship was on thin ice for a while. Memories continued to replay, and the twins all made sad expressions. Little 11, who was checking up on the changes, simply waited. Over time, the two children broke free on their own without needing his help. He gave a nod as though this had been expected. Making contact with black ink strength would normally lead to humans being corrupted. Divine spirits are naturally more resistant to it. Just the surface of the profound source gate is hard to make contact with for most humans. Little 11 touched the gate and swept his fingers over it. There seemed to be small, dark dust particles on his fingers, which he licked. These particles were the escaped black ink strength from when he opened the gate previously. In general, black ink strength would be eliminated by the surrounding white space within the orb, as yin and yang energies were constantly being exuded. However, since this was from Mo's source, it took a lot more time to purify. What was left on the door was black ink strength trying to retreat back into the profound source gate, but could not do so. It had been so long that only dust-like particles were left of them. Did either of you feel anything change in your knowledge? See? Both shook their heads with Xianxia explaining first. Uncle 11, all we experienced was recalling some bad memories. I don't think I feel anything different with my knowledge. I'm the same with Big Brother. Xianxia continued and asked, are we supposed to feel something? I guess it is different from person to person. Your father, when he was weaker, and a few others, reported that they would feel as if their knowledge, sea, and small universe were slowly being dyed black and get out of their control. Dark memories of the past would flash by, and they relieved it while slowly losing themselves. For you too, I did expect it to have some effect, but the extent was questionable. If you two couldn't handle it, we might as well call this whole thing off. Little 11 said, a little impressed that these two were completely fine after all that. What did you two experience? Just a nightmare. Xianxia stated, not wanting to delve much deeper into the topic. I did not see much. Xianxia answered straightforwardly, with eyes that did not know the word deceit. Little 11 gave a knowing nod of approval and said, well, if it affected you so little, then we might as well just enter directly. Upon those words, he placed his hand on the gate and started to push. The world seemed to tremble as the seemingly immovable gate doors started to vibrate. The dust on the gate also seemed to come alive, and they drifted more fervently towards the center. When a slit had just opened up, what seemed to be a large black blade immediately shot out. The twins could barely react, with their eyes only seeing a blurry shadow quickly approaching Little 11. As for Little 11, he had already predicted this would happen. He swiftly removed his hands from the gate and retreated to the side. The blade passed by him, narrowly snipping off a part of his fringe. As though the blade had eyes, it knew that it had missed its target. Instead of retreating back to the slit, It became more aggressive and branched out into 3 sharp, abyssal black spear-like weapons. These 3 black spears immediately pointed themselves towards whoever was present. In this case, the twins were now also in its crosshair. Little Eleven's eyes narrowed, and he swiftly took out a token. He was reluctant to use it now, but he seemed to have no choice. It was clear the children would not be able to dodge this attack on their own. Injecting his chi into the token, the whole world trembled. The sky now had array patterns all over it, with the intensity of the light from the ground becoming exponentially more blinding. "Close your eyes," Little 11 roared as the spears raced across the space between them. Xianxia and Xianxia immediately reacted by closing their own eyes. Though frightened, they trusted their uncle's words. The spears that approached them initially seemed to sizzle due to the surrounding light. But soon, a bright flash engulfed the world, turning everything into white. No matter how dark an object was, the light was so strong that all manner of darkness was eradicated for that brief moment. The spears lost their structural integrity, and they started to crack. Those web-like cracks spread and reached the trunk of those branched-out spears, even affecting past whatever it was behind the gate. Soon, those parts furthest from the door started to break down into dust as they scattered. However, with the strong light still in the surroundings, they broke down further as if nothing was left. Xianxia and Xianxia, who managed to protect their eyes from that flash, could clearly hear someone screaming. However, it was not from any of them. The scream was from behind the gate. The scream was of great anguish, filled with rage and reluctance. The next moment, they could hear something slamming against the gate, but the gate did not seem to be able to close. The thing behind the gate obviously wanted to prevent any more light from outside to enter. However, the slit in the gate still persisted despite all the effort it gave. Chapter 6019, The Surprise Behind the Profound Source Gate. Despite the screaming backdrop, Xianxia and Xianxia felt a comfortable sensation all over their body. It felt as though the air around them was caressing them in a warm embrace. Soon enough, this warm sensation faded and the screams behind the door also slowly mellowed out. When silence returned, without any instructions, they both slowly opened one eye to check on the situation. Seeing how everything had calmed down, Xianxia sighed in relief while Xianxia went to check on his sister. "Don't let your guard down. The enemy is still there," Little 11 warned, though he knew Mo well enough that it was fine to take a breather at this point. After all, that child would never want to do something that could potentially harm it. Nevertheless, better safe than sorry. This was the first time Little 11 had to use the primordial flash to defend against Mo. All previous attempts were always with experts who knew of Mo's strength firsthand. They were on guard before they even tried to open the gate, so it was unnecessary to go as far as to use the primordial flash. Little 11 naturally would prefer not to use the primordial flash if possible, since it did take up mountain piles of 9th order yin and yang element materials. Even with Moon's serene glimmer and Sun's burning light, such an amount would take time to accumulate. Currently, it could at most be fired 2 more times. Still, Little 11 was a little surprised by this sudden attack. This was the first Mo had been so aggressive. Normally, once the gate opens up, Mo would not attack. Rather, Mo tended to be more cautious when dealing with any newcomers. The last time Yongkai was here with Little 11, Mo literally hid some corner of the space behind the Profound Source Gate. Even for Yongkai, the space behind this gate was too large to explore, with only darkness in sight and his limited divine sense. Even if he wanted to find Mo, how could he be certain that Mo would not just hide in another location once it sensed him approaching? For Mo, it was like a fish swimming in water, while for others, it was like walking in a quagmire. For Yongkai, he did not feel like he could spend so much time on a wild goose chase. Not after he had already spent more than a decade searching without any fruitful result. Even the Profound Source Gate was only a gate to this unknown space. It did not contain this space itself. Even after refining it and studying it, all Yongkai could do was open and close the gate. In fact, for all its grandeur and mystery, Yongkai truly believes that was the sole purpose of the profound source gate, to keep whatever was in this other world from getting out to their world. All Yongkai managed to do after so long was to ensure that nothing would leak out of the gate under his control and open it for Little Eleven's goals. That being said, when it was others that ventured deeper into the profound source gate with Little 11, Mo would be open to attacking them. After all, it knew who it could pick a fight against and who it needed to avoid. Nevertheless, with their preparations, these attacks could be shrugged off. Unfortunately, the environment inside was not exactly friendly to the others. Regardless of the preparation, prolonged exposure to this space seems to corrupt them in one form or another. Without exception, all would have to leave this space before a year had passed. This was regardless of them being divine spirits or humans. The three of them waited for a moment for things to settle. Yang Ji and Yang Su followed Little 11's words and stayed alert. Fortunately, nothing else really happened after a few breaths had passed. Seems like we are in the clear now. Mo should be avoiding being close to the gate at this point in time, which is the perfect opportunity to fully open the gate. Little 11 said as he once more stepped closer to the profound source gate. This time, to prevent any incidents, he directly stood in front of the gap and pushed the gate open. Rumble once again, the world trembling tremor spread. As Little 11 had said, nothing truly happened as he was pushing the gate open. Even when the gap was now too large for him to push any further, nothing else occurred. It was truly anticlimactic. However, Little 11's next words sparked curiosity within all its listeners. What is going on? Hearing those words, the twins could not help but look over his arms. Behind the gate, illuminated by the light, they saw a unique scene that they had not expected. In fact, even Yongkai would not have predicted this scene to be in front of them. The furthest depths of the gate was completely dark. As long as no light touched that location, it was completely dark by the abyss. This stood true to Little 11's explanation of the place to the twins. However, what laid closer were the things that interested them. They were plants. Actual plants. However, these were not the typical plants that they could find elsewhere. The plants were pretty much all of the same color of blackish blue or blackish purple. It was only with the light that their outline and slightly different coloration could be spotted. Otherwise, everything would be uniform black. Uncle 11, didn't you say that the whole space behind the gate is just an empty space void of anything? Yang Ji cannot help but ask. Despite this being a pressing and reasonable question, Little 11 would also like to know what the hell was going on. This was not here the last time. Something must have changed. Little 11 now hesitated. This was not something he thought was possible. Chapter 60:20, Strange Flower. This is impossible. How did something like this possibly appear? Little 11 started to question everything, recalling all the past expeditions inside. However, nothing came up. These had truly just appeared out of thin air. Without being able to contain himself, Little 11 rushed into the profound source gate and directly went to pick one of the flowers. The moment he touched one, a familiar feeling washed over him. There was no need for someone else to explain it to him. He already knew what these were. So, that's what it is, Little 11 murmured, which did not go unnoticed by the twins. Still in front of the gate, Yang Ji questioned, Uncle 11, did you figure something out? Little 11 gave a slow nod and explained. This is all made using black ink strength. But it is at the same time also not black ink strength. Yang Su shook her head at this contrary answer. She asked for more clarity. So what is it? Little 11 picked out a flower and moved back to the twin. The moment he crossed the gate, he could see the flower gradually losing its original form. It was apparent that the closer he got to the light outside, the more the flower seemed to wither. This is made using black ink strength to create another life. Little 11 turned around and pointed at the ground behind the gate. In essence, this is no different from black ink strength, but it exists separately from Mo, as though it is another entity. This is not much different from the black ink clansmen in your history lessons. As you can see, because of the primordial flash, the part directly in front of the gate does not have any of these plants. It is only at the periphery, with the gate being opened up, that we can see these plants. Xianxia and Xianxia cutely bent their heads forward a little to get a better look at the flowers. They were certainly dark and strange-looking, but at the same time, quite cool as well. Their shape was no different from the ones that could be found outside. They were not all homogeneous, with some variations between them. At the same time, their placement was random, as though it was an actual flower field. Xianxia could not hold back his curiosity and asked, "Uncle 11, can I hold that for a moment?" Little 11 hesitated for a moment, but relented. After all, they were still safe here. "Okay, just be careful. If anything goes wrong, make sure to shout out for help." Little 11 passed the withering flower to Xianxia and cautiously watched. The boy took it with both hands, trying to get a feel of its texture. Even when it touched his skin, he did not have the same back memories flood back into him again. He saw that his sister was also curious, so he handed it over to her. When she felt it all over, she could not help but comment, "It really feels like a flower. The stem is tougher, the petals are softer and smoother. Just that, it's a bit colder, yeah, but I guess it's colder because there's no sun inside." Xianxia replied with a tilt of his head. Meanwhile, little 11 questioned, "Huh? The black ink strength is not affecting them at all. What is going on?" Although little 11 expected things to be fine, he was still shocked to see how the black ink strength from the flower had no effect on them. He questioned if it was due to the flower already withering, but that did not make sense, as even the remnant black ink strength outside the gate had affected them. The only way to test this out is for them to go in and touch the flowers inside. Little 11 quickly shook his head. In fact, due to these major changes behind the primordial source gate, he believed it to be wise for them to retreat first. Since it was to just get a cursory check of the situation, and not really to find Imo, Xianxia was the best candidate to do it. The father should make sure it's safe for his kids, after all. Little 11 mused, and was about to open his mouth when something shocking happened. The withering flower suddenly began to expand, like a final desperate move. Moving along with it were the flowers behind the gate. A torrent of black shot out from behind the gate, while the withering flower quickly tried to stretch back to the gate. Unbeknownst to little 11, it was at the instant when the withering flower expanded that black ink strength began to affect Xianxia. The black ink strength this time was definitely more potent than the first time she had made contact with it. However, the effects on her were more muted as well. It just caused her to be disoriented this time. Nevertheless, this disorientation was enough. If she was still in perfect condition, she would have instinctively thrown the flower away from her. However, with her hand still held onto it, the expansion of black ink strength naturally got wrapped around her fingers as it sought to escape. As though having learned the lesson from the previous attack, the black torrent moved faster than before. It would not give little 11 a chance to use the primordial flash again. Before primordial flash could activate, the black torrent made contact with the outstretched, withered flower and started to pull back. This time with Xianxia with it, hand stuck. There was not even a scream from her as she got silently pulled closer into the gate. She did not even feel her feet being forced to be dragged against the ground. Not even the two arms that wrapped around her waist were felt. Xianxia had reacted quickly to grab onto his sister. Unfortunately, his meager strength was not enough to pull her free. In fact, he had made his own situation worse as he got rapidly pulled in as well. By the time there was a bright flash, the two children were gone, with little 11 cursing how the situation had gotten drastically worse. Sullivan, guys, any feedback so far? Draggy? Want more action? Want more world building? It's okay as is. Chapter 6021, released. Darkness soon envelopes his eyes as Xianxia could only see the faint light behind him disappear. It was no longer a matter of going back at this point. All he wished for was his sister's safety. In the pitch-black darkness, there was no point looking around and relying on his eyes. He started to close his eyes and used his divine sense to grasp his surroundings. The most important thing right now was to avoid making contact with black ink strength, lest he too got caught up like Xianxia. If he did, he might loosen his grip and truly lose his sister in this forsaken darkness. His divine sense spread out like a tide. Unlike the outside world, this place seems to suppress it. He could feel his divine sense being encroached upon and get pushed back. In fact, there was a constant tingling sensation, but thankfully not much else. Unbeknownst to him earlier, a net had been formed around them, a net that kept them from escaping. As for the surroundings past the net, there were unusual mountains and rivers. Supposed trees and grass were also in abundance, with flowers and fruits scattered about. As for the limits of where his divine sense could reach, the rivers were the denotation of the boundary. The prohibitive and encroaching sensation got infinitely stronger the moment his divine sense got close to these rivers. He could even feel the dangers of the waters himself. He focused on the scene ahead, and frighteningly enough, the plants in front of them seemed to warp themselves to pull them forward. It was as if they were made of some kind of slimy substance. They would disfigure and pull from the front, and once Xianxia and Xianxia got past them, they would return to their original forms. It was through this method that their momentum quickened the deeper they went. Xianxia began to frown, and he immediately tapped into a space ring. We need to quickly escape. The next instant, 2 crystals of blue and orange came out. Xianxia firmly grasped onto them with both hands, and the mark behind his palm started to glow. A bright flash immediately enveloped the whole area, scorching off all the black ink strength around him. Trees, grass, even the soil, none were spared. With him at the center, there was even a massive pit below. Naturally, the he and Xianxia had been freed from their constraints as well. Ups. Xianxia quickly grabbed a hold of Xianxia before she completely fell into the crater below. He felt it unnerving to fall into the crater, so he decided to just stay in midair with her in his arms. Thankfully, the effects of black ink strength did not linger on her for long, as Xianxia soon regained consciousness. In fact, she was immediately confused as she suddenly felt warm arms under her, but nothing in sight. She questioned if her eyelids were opened as she tried to open them, to only find that the scene before her was genuinely pitch black. "Brother, are you here?" she asked, a little unnerved. "Yeah, start using your divine sense. No point relying on our eyes here," Xianxia said with a sigh. Xianxia did, as she was advised, to see a strange scene around her. She could already make sense of what had happened from fragments of her memories. Even the crater below was something she deduced her brother had created. What made the scene strange was the crater underneath them reforming itself, as though the whole ground was alive. However, a more thorough investigation of her surroundings was halted by her brother. "Since you're fine, can you get up on your own?" Xianxia asked, with his arms already being lowered. But I'm still a little dizzy," Xianxia complained as she took advantage of this opportunity to wrap her arms around his neck and playfully held on. "Just get off me already," Xianxia nagged as he completely took his arms off her. Yet, she clung on to him, using even her legs. "Seriously, just get off me already. We're in danger right now, and Uncle 11 is no longer here with us." Xianxia persisted to say, "Well, we're not in that big of a danger." Xianxia shook her head and explained, "If you're able to make that crater, that means that whatever they had given us is extremely effective here. We don't exactly have an unlimited amount, you know, and we don't really know what might happen here." Xianxia pointed out, believing they should remain cautious. "I guess you're right. But, I don't think black ink strength will affect us that much if we get more exposed to it," Xianxia said, and continued to give an account of her experience. "I don't know why, but I did feel that the effects are weakening the more I get exposed to it." Then, do you want to stay here longer to try out your theory?" Xianxia said, believing that they should have enough resources to last long enough to test this out. Well, I guess it would be safer to head back to the exit for dash." Before Xianxia could finish speaking, she frowned, and Xianxia had already moved. Xianxia tried to tear open a void crack, but he could not do so. The best he could do was fly off, away from this place. After all, just underneath them, the whole ground was quaking. What seemed to be sharp spikes seemed to be forming, ready to strike at them, if he did not escape at this time. Then when would he? As expected, those spikes launched at him and his sister, but they were clearly still tethered to the ground with a thin string connecting the two. They were frighteningly fast, moving quicker than them. Without the ability to tear through space, they were truly just sitting ducks here. Chapter 6022, World Change. Arg. I can't tear through space here. The space principles are strange. They aren't the same. Xianxia cursed as he tried to gain some distance from the black spikes. For the twins, they had no small number of adventures with their family to different universe worlds and small universes. However, such places all have the same world principles within them. The world principles here were too different from the outside world. In fact, mastery over the certain principles outside need not necessarily mean one would be capable of manipulating principles inside this place. Once Xianxia heard what he said, she was quick to react. Still on her brother, she took out another pair of crystals and caused another explosion. Everything around them turned into a white flash once more, and the spike chasing after them disintegrated into white. Then again, since this has happened once, the twins were certain this would happen again. Even if they had mountains of crystals, if they kept this up, eventually they would run out. The best was for them to retreat back outside. However, would this strange place allow them to? The world, seeming to have acknowledged that such means were too minor to handle the children, began to change tactics. The landscape itself started to shift, with mountains and rivers bendings and twisting. The landmass below them started to rise in one direction. Their form no longer seemed solid, changing to something more fluid. Rivers and earth mixed into one, indistinguishable from each other. They raised to form a tsunami, wishing to engulf the two. The twins were naturally alarmed by this. Xianxia and Xianxia both braced for the incoming attack. Without speaking, Xianxia took out an array plate, while Xianxia took out more crystals. With a little bit of qi inserted into the array plate, it began to spin and 8 flags shot out. They each covered a cardinal and ordinal direction. A translucent sphere of around 9 meters in radius formed, enveloping the twins. Meanwhile, Xianxia was prepared to launch another purifying light once the tsunami got close enough. However, before they did anything else, the whole tsunami seemed to freeze in place, and a voice came from above at its crest. The voice was neither booming nor threatening. It was more calm and collected. "Stop. We do not wish to fight." Xianxia and Xianxia naturally looked up to see a few figures gathered at the crest. These figures certainly did not seem human. They were humanoid, but certainly not humans. Some had more arms, some had longer limbs, some even had carapaces as skin. Regardless, there was a particular figure that stood out amongst the rest. This figure definitely emitted more pressure than the rest. In terms of his aura alone, Xianxia and Xianxia were certain they could not best him. That was just how overwhelming his aura was. Isn't he in the Emperor realm? No, maybe the Dao Seal realm? Xianxia and Xianxia both thought. After all, they would be able to tell a person's cultivation if they were weaker than them. Anyone stronger had to be above the Dao Source realm. However, this person's aura was not overwhelming to the point of reaching the open heaven realm. Then again, who knows if this figure was suppressing his cultivation? From afar, the figure held out his fist as an indication for his men to stop moving. He knew that if the weak were to get involved in this, their deaths would be fruitless. Such a time had long passed when the weak were used as useless cannon fodder. Now, they served a greater purpose. Furthermore, he was personally confident in his own strength, which would be able to suppress the two children. Thus, he went down alone. From the crest of the tsunami, he leaped down and stopped directly in front of the twins. Naturally, they both had their guards up, with Xianxia already prepared to unleash purifying light. This light used to haunt his armies in the past. Yet now it was just a reminiscent scene. He repeated his words. "We are not looking to fight against you. Lay down your arms." Naturally, how could Xianxia and Xianxia possibly comply? If they did, they would be helpless chickens. Instead, their grips tightened on the objects they were holding. Seeing this, the figure sighed and added, "I see that there is no helping your need for caution. In that case, I just ask that you do not unleash purifying light here. I am Imo and I believe you are the children of Yangkai." Once the twins heard his name, they reeled back. Of course they would. This was the Black Ink clansman, the royal lord their father had praised numerous times in the past. Though they were enemies, there was a sense of respect for each other as soldiers on the battlefield. Their father had highlighted how out of all the royal lords, no, black and clansmen, Immortality was special in his eyes. He was the only one with wit, cunningness, and bravery. Every one of their battles were always fights inches away from death. How, like their father, Immortality had climbed through the ranks of originally being a territory lord to pseudo-royal lord to an actual royal lord. How he was the first and only to accomplish such a feat, though enemies. They might actually share more similarities than differences. It was just unfortunate that they never had a moment of peace to really get to know one another. Other than crossing blades, possibly, that exchange of drinks at No Return Pass marked their only time to get to know one another. The twins naturally heard of his eventual fate. It made it all the stranger how Immortality was currently here, still alive. Furthermore, he knew who they were. They questioned their ears if they heard wrongly. But his next words confirmed that this was reality. Young kids, the battle against your world and the Black Ink clan has ceased for thousands of years. Why have you come to our land? Immortality questioned. It was not in an overbearing manner or anything. Just an actual question that showcased his curiosity. Xianxia and Xianxia hesitated to explain. After all, the reason why they were here had something to do with their Uncle 11. They did not know if sharing this information with the enemy would be a detriment to the overall cause. Seeing how the children were not speaking up, Immortality just shrugged and moved on from the topic. Although he did want to know, at this point, it was not truly necessary. These children would not really amount to much in a battle, and if anyone stronger crosses the gate, he would be alerted of it. Currently, no such thing had occurred, so he was assured they did not exactly come with hostile intentions either. If anything, he already had a faint guess as the Holy One's other half was detected at the gate. To show his intentions first for them to let down their guard, he confessed, "Nothing good will come of starting a war again, much less doing harm to the children of Xianxia. Your father is basically the best guarantor you have, so no need to be so wary." Xianxia and Xianxia thought for a moment and realized this to be reasonable. However, Xianxia realized the contradiction. She got off her brother and moved in front of him, directly questioning, "Then, why did you kidnap us?"